Today, we are going to start a new series with Dr. Paul White on the pillars to success and finding the best version of yourself. Um, First and foremost, this is going to be our very first major pillar today, and that is going to be motivation. And we are going to go through a list of questions, kind of picking the brain of Dr. Paul White and his experience within academics and within motivation as a whole. Thank you for being
Great.
here.
Thank you for having me.
So, starting this off, within your personal perspective, in your experience, what separates people who stay motivated from those who struggle?
Well, this is highly individualized, and so I'm going to be painting this with a broad brush. But I think the people that are motivated are making an active decision, or they're taking an active decision, making active decisions in their life to be motivated, and they've grasped onto something maybe that is they're very passionate about. So I think either you have to have something that you're very, very passionate about that motivates you, or kind of fake it till you make it. Find something that you can go through the motions with until you eventually develop a liking and a passion for that specific thing that you're embarking upon.
Do you think motivation is overrated compared to discipline?
I think they're different sides of the same coin. I think they're inextricably linked to one another. I don't think you can have one without the other. And I think if a person were being truly honest with themselves, they've experienced the kind of tug of war, I guess you could say, or the push and pull of both of those traits within themselves when they're embarking upon something is such as self-improvement or bettering their circumstances.
What's something about motivation that most people get completely wrong?
I think most people think that in order to be motivated, they have to end up being like a superstar. Like we see so many high-functioning people out there that appear to be. Maybe, social media makes them look perhaps that way. I think the unsung part of motivation is the grind. It's the part that people don't see. It's getting up every day and going through the motions of something that is not necessarily sexy or fun, but we do it because we know that the objective or the long-term payoff is going to be worth it. So I think that that's the thing that many people mistake is that it's something that you have to inherently have, and you have to be one of these dynamic individuals. But I think anybody, and no matter where they're at in their life, can develop it and build on it.
Based off some real-world observations, have you noticed changes in people's motivation levels in recent years, in your experience?
Yeah, I would say within modernity itself, I would say that I've seen individuals that have become more motivated, or what I would call hyper motivated, and then there's just as many, if not more, individuals that maybe feel overwhelmed. I think that human beings aren't necessarily great at being confronted with lots of choices and decisions. And I think that many times what we see in the modern world is people become inundated with so many choices and so many decisions, end up kind of frozen in place, not really being able to make any one decision.
Do you think modern life is making it harder for people to stay motivated?
I think there's a lot of white noise. So I think within our lives, we are confronted with a lot of tasks that are possibly unnecessary, that we may put a premium on and think that they're important or they need to be a part of our lives. I think that if we were to go through and really evaluate and do an inventory of our lives, much of what we do on a daily basis is probably unnecessary, or at least we don't need to preoccupy so much energy maybe into those, or funnel so much energy into those areas.
Why do you think so many people feel stuck even when they want to change?
I think that everybody inside their mind's eye has a vision of themselves. They know who they want to be. They know the kind of person they want to be. At the end of the day, though, that requires work. It requires sacrifice. It requires us to give up short-term enjoyment and the pleasures of life for long-term success. So I think that at the end of the day, many of these thoughts are sexy in themselves to think about, but when it comes to actually putting them to application and where the rubber meets the road, I think it becomes more difficult. And I think good intentions are many times all that these things are.
So, from a mental health angle, because obviously motivation does come from our mind, do you think low motivation is often misunderstood as laziness?
I believe so. I think that individuals that have a passion for something, I think it's very easy for them to stay motivated. With that being said, I've known a number of individuals, including myself, that have been able to develop a passion for something out of something they didn't necessarily begin to have a passion for. I'll give you a little bit of a story. Years ago, I did quite a bit of long distance running. I'm not necessarily a person, or I was not a person that loved to run. It was something that I ended up doing because I loved the challenge of it, but it was not something that I intrinsically fell in love with. What's interesting is there was many nights, many times where I just forced myself to go out and take a jog, maybe 4 or 5 miles, and eventually I got up to like doing 10 miles and such. What's interesting is over time, overdoing it, over a number of years, I started really getting passionate about it. I started really enjoying it and having a love for it. And so I think that there are plenty of things in life that if we were to embark upon them and be consistent, we may not enjoy them in the beginning, but at some point we'll probably begin to like them and maybe even get passionate about them.
In your opinion, how closely is motivation tied to mental health conditions like depression?
Well, I think people that are depressed obviously have a much, I would say, a reduced capacity for motivation in many, many ways. You can argue this, but I think depression has a certain element of nihilism within it. And so I think that if you are depressed and you feel like, what you do doesn't matter, and that you're not ever going to really move the needle, you're going to be less likely to embark upon life's adventure and life's journeys and to take those risks and to do things consistently that are going to build your life, build your character, and take you abroad and help you basically really live a full and rich life.
Do you think society puts too much pressure on people to always be productive?
I do. I think that, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, balance is really important. And I think what people sometimes focus on, and I see this especially amongst many younger individuals that have parents that want to maybe enroll them in too many activities. I'm a firm believer that being busy and having activities is very positive, both mentally and physically for people. However, I do believe that you can do too much. And I think there are times where it's important to not do anything, to let yourself decompress, to relax, to let your brain rest, let your body rest. And so I think it's important to know that being busy and productive is great, but within reason. And you want to make sure that's balanced out, because the worst thing is burning yourself out, or doing things that are overtaxing you in some way. I think that you have to strike that balance.
One of the subtopics I want to get into is culture and society within motivation. So, how much do you think things like social media and the internet affect our motivation?
I think that some of those images that we see on social media platforms, some of the memes or even like inspirational videos, I think that those can act as a catalyst in the beginning, and I think they can help a person on their journey of motivation. I think we all can relate to watching a inspirational gym video, or maybe something along the lines with like a person going back to school and getting their education, and that fires us up. We can get at least momentarily passionate about that, but that fades. So I think initially those things are great advertisements, and they may bring it to our attention. But long-term sustainability requires something deep inside of us, something that is going to keep propelling us, that's going to keep that fire burning inside of us. So I would say that they definitely have their place, but ultimately motivation, discipline, these types of things they come from within inside of us.
Do you think hustle culture helps people or harms them?
Both. I see some individuals that embrace hustle culture productively, effectively, and in a healthy way. So again, getting back to what I was saying before, they're not doing too much. They recognize they have a certain amount of time per day. They're getting out, they're doing what they need to do, but they're not overdoing it. And they definitely have downtime. They take days off. They protect their mental health. These are all very important things. When the other side of it, or the other side of the coin basically, are individuals that burn themselves out. They are hyper-focused in a couple of areas in life. Again, so they're out of balance. Anytime you hyper-focus on something, you become out of balance. And so ultimately that's going to become self-deleterious to you. And you're not going to be as productive, and over a sustained long period of time, you're going to burn out, and you're ultimately not going to become successful, in my opinion.
Is comparing ourselves to others killing our motivation?
I think it's a horrible idea to compare yourself to anybody else except yourself. With that being said, it's human nature to do that. All humans do it. We all have a tendency to look at someone else, make comparisons, right? So the double-edged sword with that is that initially looking at another person may motivate you. So you might go to the gym or maybe to school, and you see someone that's brilliant, or like at the gym you see someone that's in really great shape, and you compare. And so initially there is this maybe this impetus, this it helps ignite that flame. But I think over the long haul, you can't keep doing that. You have to use that initial spark, maybe as inspiration. Someone inspired you to basically improve yourself, and then just focus on yourself. Focus on where you were a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, where you're at now, and using an analogy, back to like when I used to run. If you're racing someone, you don't, go looking around to see where everybody's at. You're just focused on yourself. You're focused on your own race. You're staying in your own lane.
Within advice, within motivation, if someone says, "I just can't find motivation," what's your honest response to that?
Well, again, I would think, I would ask them, what are you passionate about? Tell me something you're passionate about. And as I stated in another podcast, there's a high tendency, or there's a high degree of, when you've mastered one area, or if you've put a lot of effort into one area, it has a tendency to spill over. That discipline spills over into other areas. So the very first thing I would ask them is, what are you really passionate about? Now, you could get an answer or a response that says, I'm not really passionate about anything. And there are probably a number of individuals that feel that way out there. The next question I would ask is, what's important to you? If you're not passionate about anything, what elements in your life right now are important to you? What do you hold in your life at a premium? Almost everyone's going to have some answer to that. And then I would suggest taking whatever element that might be. Let's say it's being a better father, or basically, doing better at school or at work. And then putting together very, very basic objectives for that. So if that's something I want to do, if I want to become better in this area, I need to do certain tasks. There's certain objectives that need to be reached. I think once a person starts doing that, again, fake it till you make it. They start out doing it. They don't necessarily like it, but they know it's going to, improve their circumstances in one way or another. Again, I believe over time, they will start to enjoy it. They'll start liking it. They'll start getting passionate about it, and they'll start being motivated. They'll feel a level of motivation with that.
Do you believe motivation comes before action or after it?
Again, kind of a chicken versus the egg kind of idea here. I believe you need both. I think you need both simultaneously. Now, again, sometimes when we think of motivation, we think of it as an all or nothing proposition. It exists on a gradient. So you can have motivation for something, but not necessarily a lot of motivation. You might just have a little bit of motivation towards something. But that little motivation you have still requires action. So I think that you would put action, of course, in, for this long-term goal or objective that you have, with as much motivation as you can muster initially. And with the idea is that those both will grow. There is a symbiotic relationship with motivation and action. So one feeds off the other, and it can create a positive feedback loop.
Do you think some people use lack of motivation as a cover for fear or avoidance?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Fear of success is a real thing. And fear of failure equally is a real thing. And something that I've realized over the years especially is that it's much easier to be pessimistic than it is to be optimistic, I think, sometimes. I think that it's easy to find problems and not necessarily look for solutions. So I think if we're being honest with ourselves, truly honest with ourselves, authentic, we'll be able to read, our thoughts and feelings on this if there's fear, if there's an underlying fear of success or of failure.
What uncomfortable truth about motivation do people need to hear?
That it's something that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Motivation in most situations, most scenarios requires sustained effort on our part. And that's not sexy, right? People want to have it now. They want to accomplish things now. It's difficult to wait. So I think that if we're being really honest with ourselves, we'll realize that to really truly be motivated with something over the long term requires us to be consistent, requires us to put energy into it, and it's not something we're going to get results with necessarily right away.
Going into some personal reflection, I want to wrap this up with some overview questions, very based off your personal experience. Has your own view on motivation changed over your career?
It has. I would say more specifically going through my doctorate. I've had a number of areas in my life where I've have developed motivation or developed the discipline and the motivation to carry through to the completion of an objective or a task. I would say my doctorate took that to another level though, because it tested me in a lot of different ways with motivation. It wasn't something I could do overnight. It took 4 years, so it took sustained effort on my part. I had to dig deep at times, so I thought I was a fairly motivated person before I finished my doctorate, but going through that whole process, kind of that gladiator academy of sorts, really changed my perspective overall on motivation and how motivation related to myself.
What's the best piece of advice about motivation you've ever heard or given to somebody?
I'm going to go back to what I said before, fake it till you make it. There are real life lessons in that statement. I think that many times people have this belief that they have to have all the answers, everything has to be perfect. The stars have to align a certain way in order for motivation to manifest itself. That's not the case at all. The case is basically, finding something. It doesn't matter what it is, but something that's important to you or that you're passionate about each day. I think that that's what it requires. There's no magic pill. It requires sustained effort on our part.
And last but not least, I want to wrap this up with one following last question. Do you personally rely on motivation, or would you say you rely more on something else?
I do rely on motivation. There are many times I will think of something that, or maybe my mind will gravitate towards something that I want to do, or something that I think would be good for me. And so there is an initial spark, typically, in my mind's eye. There's an initial impetus towards maybe a task, a project, or an accomplishment. So there's this little bit of motivation to begin with. That has to be sustained by effort, though, and action and work. And so I think that's what fans the flames for me, is as I continue to take action, as I continue to put the work in towards this long-term goal or short-term objective, whatever it may be, my continued effort, my continued engagement in this task is something that fans and fuels my motivation.
And wrapping this up, before we end things, is there anything else that you would like to say to the audience before we finish this up?
I would say that take heart, even if you feel that you're not a particularly motivated person, or that you're struggling right now. Maybe you're in a valley, you're not on top of a hill. That motivation is something that everybody has the ability to access, and it's highly transformative. So if you embrace the idea of motivation, you find something that you're passionate or you care about, you look at areas of your life that you want to improve upon or build upon to become that better or greatest version of yourself, take heart. You absolutely have that capacity to do that. Every human being does. And it starts out small. Every journey starts with one step. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. And every person that you look at right now that appears to be highly motivated and successful started out with that single step. They had to put the work in, they had to put the time in, they had to put the effort in, the sacrifice. And there's something about that. There's something about doing all those things in unison that really builds self-esteem and helps develop character and helps you really become the best version of yourself.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Paul White. That was very, very insightful information. And like I said, everybody, this is going to be the first episode of our series on the pillars to success and finding the best version of yourself. That was motivation. And thank you guys for listening in.
Thank you.